Hi everyone, I'm here today to present Where Are They Now? An examination of early career job placements. I am Dr. Jillian McNiff-Villamere. I'm an associate professor at Southern Connecticut State University in the sport management program. I worked on this project with my colleagues, Dr. Glenn Solomon, who is an associate professor of economics at Flagler College, and Dr. David Rivera, who is a full professor of hospitality and tourism, also at Flagler College. So a little bit about me. I worked in the sports industry. So my early career was spent working in sports, and I largely didn't feel prepared for what jobs in the sports industry were all about. So that has really formed a foundation for a lot of the research and has influenced my teaching as well. This particular study came out of prospective student visitation days, where prospective students and their parents would sit in an auditorium, and my colleagues and I would answer questions. And one question that we got asked every single time was, will I get a job in the sports industry? And it was really hard to answer. And part of that was because we just didn't have accurate data to reflect if our graduates were or were not getting jobs in the sports industry. So that set me out on a quest for answers to figure out what was really happening out there. In some literature, there have been a few studies out there that have looked at early career job placements, and there has been some cause for concern. Um, Parks did a study in 1991 where it was found that early career sport management professionals were leaving the industry and moving into other areas. There have been studies that have looked at attrition within specific sports industry segments. Particularly coaching or college athletics. So this study looked at the graduates of one particular program instead of looking at people by type of position they had after graduation. So the purpose of this study was to determine how many early career graduates are employed in the sports industry. And to do that, I looked at one particular program at one particular school. So early career sport management graduates within 2014 to 2017, which was 3 to 5 years past graduation. Um, that is a standard, 3 to 5 years is standard for early career. Baisley in 2003 determined that that was an appropriate length of time for someone to be considered an early career employee. I looked at one small private liberal arts college with a student population of about 2,500 students total. 55% of those students are in state and 67% are female. Approximately 100 to 130 are sport management majors. That fluctuates a little based on the semester and the year, but that's a ballpark average for a number of sport management majors at this particular program. Of those, approximately 75% are male. So you'll notice that 67% of the total student population is female, but 75% of the sport management population is male. So what I did to start this study was get a list of our alumni from Alumni Relations. The Alumni Relations Office did keep a list of graduates and where they were and what they were doing. I found the list was largely outdated. It was not a priority to them to keep sport management graduates. The list had not been updated in several years, and a lot of the information was inaccurate at the time. So I took that list and basically cut out all the information except for name of the graduate, year of graduation. Then I used the information from Alumni Relations. To that, I added information from Career Services. The Career Services Department did a survey at graduation and then 6 months post-graduation where they asked young alumni where they were working, what kind of jobs they were in. So I used that information to populate my spreadsheet. I reached out to the sport management internship coordinator who kept in touch with some of the alumni. I used LinkedIn only when LinkedIn appeared to be updated. So if they had created LinkedIn, because I know I require it for my classes, if they created LinkedIn for a class and had never updated it again, I did not include that information. But if LinkedIn had been clearly updated since graduation, I did use that as a valid source of current jobs for alumni. Then I use personal referrals. This study originally began as a mixed method study. So I did a handful of interviews with early career graduates, and they largely kept in touch with each other better than they kept in touch with faculty and career services. So I did use that information to determine a few remaining people where they were currently employed. So the results, out of the total list, it was an N of 115. That list included 79 males and 36 females, pretty standard relative to the total population. Of that, I was able to gather the information for 93% of the graduates. There were 7 who I was not able to find. I tried emailing them with the email address they kept on file at the college. I tried emailing them again. No one seemed to know where they were, and they were non-responsive to any of my attempts to locate them. Of the results, of the 93% I was able to find, 50% were employed in sports industry positions. So this included things like coordinators at colleges and professional sports teams, positions in recreation centers or facilities, YMCAs, community centers, sport related, also personal trainings positions, working at fitness centers. All of those were considered sports industry positions. 34% were employed in business-related roles with sports skills. So as part of the sport management program here, students have to take classes in accounting, event planning, economics. So the skills that they used in those courses translated in the business program, but were also considered useful in the sports industry. So people who were employed in business related roles with sports skills were employed in things like recruiting, where they felt their skills in working with people, networking, presenting, that they learned in the sport management program were really useful in the sports industry. I talked to one alumni who was an event planner for a private company. So she felt her skills in event planning that she developed in the sports program were really useful in her current career. So there were skills that they developed as part of the sport management program that they ended up using in non-sport related skills. So that was the additional 34%. So approximately 85% of early career graduates were employed in sports or business related fields. This included 26% female and 74% male of those who were employed in sport and business related fields. There is some related research out there that tells us that graduates employed in fields that are related to their degrees tend to earn more money. This becomes particularly important in the sports industry, where jobs at the coordinator level or entry level are notoriously paying very low. So if we have graduates that are working in a field related to their degree and they have the potential to earn more, that is a positive for sport management faculty. And then 27% of graduates were employed in a field related to their major, which was from a study in 2019 that looked at graduates across multiple universities, and graduates overall, only 27% were in their field. So if 85% were related to their major in this study, it seemed much higher than what the average was in this FANE study in 2019. So some important things to note. Data was collected prior to 2020. The 2019-2020 class is understandably going to have very different job placement rates than what we saw prior to this. So COVID-19 has greatly impacted sports industry positions and jobs. So this information was collected prior to 2020, and it's important to note that. The data collected was a snapshot in time. So, as job situations are fluid, once data was collected, it was not changed to update career changes. As I mentioned, this was previously a mixed method study, and a few of the interviews I did, people were changing jobs during the process of scheduling and interviewing them. So, I talked to two people who were employed in sport. We set up times for interviews, and when we talked, they were considering leaving sport to work in unrelated fields. But at the time of data collection, they were employed in sports industry positions. So it's important to note that job placement is fluid and people are constantly changing jobs. So keeping track and updating as we go was a challenge for this type of research. And then it's important to acknowledge that this was a small sample size. Being at a small school in a smaller program, there are just fewer alumni to talk to and to determine how many of them are or are not employed in sports industry positions. So, some suggestions. What can programs do? I strongly recommend that you keep in touch with your alumni. This study was very hard to do coming from no information and trying to piece together where people who graduated 3 to 5 years ago are currently working. Especially if students don't feel they have a great relationship with faculty. So I have some alumni who are really great at keeping in touch and I hear from them regularly, and then others who I almost never hear from. So I would suggest finding a way to keep in touch with alumni as they graduate. Collecting current email addresses or social media handles, however they prefer to communicate, whether it's through a newsletter or through texting. Keeping up with where people are is important to do as you go instead of trying to backfill a spreadsheet later. Working with alumni relations and career services is helpful here, because these groups also care where alumni are working. Alumni relations cares because they want to be able to reach out to alumni and they want to reach out to alumni, especially in positions that are successful and high profile. Career services also wants to be able to document that people who have graduated from their programs are successful in the industry. So this information is important to a variety of sources, and it's important to work together to make sure that that information is actually kept and stored somewhere. Um, we need this information because parents and students ask. Every prospective student day, parents and students want to know, if I start taking these classes, will I be able to get a job? So, important to keep this information and keep it up to date so that you can use that information when you have these meetings with parents and students. Administration cares because if we are in a position where budget cuts are happening everywhere and you need to justify faculty positions and justify that your students are learning and they're able to obtain sports industry employment, knowing that your alumni are out there in the sports industry is helpful. Also, bringing back graduates to speak to students. I know that I have had many alumni come and talk to my classes to tell students what their jobs have been like, or to do networking events or informational interviews. And that's really helpful if you can just know where they are instead of having to find them later. And then internship placements and pipelines for jobs. It's really helpful when you have this information in some sort of database that you can reach out to people and say, I have a student who wants to work in this industry. Is there anything you can do to help? So I would strongly suggest keeping this information, storing it, and updating it regularly. I know in a position where we are all overtaxed and trying to maintain our current level of productivity, this is not always a priority level, but I strongly recommend it being important for the long-term success of your program and keeping in touch with alumni. Here are my references and my email. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I can be reached at this Gmail address, or the next one is my Twitter handle if you'd like to reach out that way. I'm happy to answer any questions and share more information about this study if you have it. Thank you. My name is Jill, and I did this study It started, so I have always like wondered what happened to people once they graduated. So I did this study and I originally kind of thought it out as being a mixed method study. So I was going to survey people and then do follow-up interviews for the people who were out of sport to find out why.
Mhm.
Um, and and it was really hard to connect with alumni. And I think some of it is if they are out of sport, they don't want to talk to us anymore, right? They don't want to reconnect with their faculty. And I had also not taught all the people in the group. So the group of alumni that I surveyed, um, some of them overlapped with me and some of them didn't. So I just didn't have great luck reaching out to the ones that I didn't know personally. So I ended up concluding the study at just a quantitative, like, where are these people? Are they in or out of sport? Um, and it it was really to answer the question when I went to prospective student day, what can my child do with this degree? And I was happy with the numbers, right? If 85% are in sport, or if they perceive that they are using their sport management skills in their current job, I thought that was pretty good. Um, the the career services collecting of data, they don't think about it the same way that we do. So they were looking at, like, are people employed in full-time positions, then that is successful. But that doesn't answer the question for me as sport management faculty, like, are they working in sport, and why? So I'm happy to answer questions about it. I know I have a small sample size of being at a small school. That was that was what I had.
Well, I do have a couple of things. First of all, I want to say great job because I always wonder that too. You know, we get the same questions. By the way, I'm at the University of St. Joseph in West Hartford. So I'm
Oh,
in
okay.
Connecticut too. So, hey. um, so if you, so I'm assuming just from what you just said that you study your students from your own school. Like did you go to other schools? Did you
I
put it out there?
I did not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not worried about the sample size because, you know, this is what happens, especially when you start out. But yeah, I thought it was really great. You know, you certainly and you have a framework for a much bigger study, obviously. How long have you been in the position you're in?
So in my current role at in Connecticut, I've only been there since August.
Oh, okay. All right. And you did this study from August till.
No, I did this study at Flagler College where I was before here.
Oh. All right, I understand now. Okay. All right. And how long had you been there?
I was there for a total of 6 years. So this information was collected in the spring of 18, and I had been there 4 years at that point.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised too because when I came to USJ, they the department doesn't follow their alumni at all. Like we have institutional giving and we have an alum department, which, like you said, you know what they look for is not the same things that we're looking for. So I thank you for that. And actually, to hear that 85% are working in either a sport job or using their sport management skills, I think is fabulous. Because that's my sport management program is housed in the business department. So they have to take business classes as well as sport management classes.
And it was the same at Flagler as well. So it was, when I started, it was a separate department, and then it was kind of under business. And either way, they always had to take econ,
Mhm.
macro and micro. They had to take accounting 1 and 2. They had to take, some general business classes. So when I ended up interviewing a few of the alumni, and asking them, those who were out of sport, can you tell me about what you're doing? And do you find your sport management education valuable? And they all said yes. And maybe it was the ones who were willing to talk to me, and maybe it was the ones who had a good rapport with me, but they felt that their skills in things like management and people skills,
Mhm.
the presentation skills, so we really pressed on them, like being able to present every semester, every class had a presentation. So their ability to speak in front of a crowd, to talk to different types of people, to work with different stakeholders, they thought was foundational in their sport management education, but they were really using in, somebody had been working in sport events and then switched over and was doing events for an insurance company. And, someone else was a recruiter for a tech company. So felt that the public speaking and the interaction communication skills that they learned in sport management were really valuable in their current roles.
So yeah, nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I had a question that kind of feeds off that idea. Did you have a strict definition of what you were calling sport related skills, or did you kind of leave it up to them to make that determination themselves?
So that is a really good question. When I did my dissertation study, it was very framed out of what was in sport and what was out of sport. So that study, things like working for a marketing firm and sometimes dealing with sport clients was not in sport because you were working for a marketing firm. So for this, what I first looked at was in sport and out of sport. It was about 50-50. And I had an undergraduate research assistant working with me, and she was distraught that it was only 50-50. Like, what happens to all these other people? So then once I did the follow-up interviews and asked them, like, did you find your degree valuable? And part of it was that I was a little worried as faculty that they were going to say that I wasted my time, right? I should have been a business major. I should have been a comm major or whatever. So in asking them, they were the ones that said, well, all of these things I learned in the sport management program, I'm using in my current job. So that was how that part of the information came out.
Yeah, it just always seems to be this battle when people say, yeah, they're not working in sport. We talk in generalities about these transferable skills, but I wonder if I've never seen anywhere in which these quote unquote transferable skills are defined. So it makes it a little bit ambiguous, I guess. So I was just curious if you had a way to do it.
No, and I think, some of their transferable skills, some people come in with that, right? Some people have that innate ability to do these things, and some of it we have to coach it out of them. So yeah, I don't know that. And like even some of it, I don't know if we can take credit for the things that they're doing, but we have to take take the win where we can get it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in a college of health and human services, so there seems to always be a battle between these soft skills that maybe administrators think that we could develop in sport management versus the hard skills that they teach in nursing and in those programs, the harder sciences versus the social sciences, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, the sport management program is a lot of soft skills.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
we're not teaching them, we're not really teaching them hard skills. So having them learn how to take criticism and learn how to work with people who are not like them is really the focus. Um and that is hard to justify to people who are used to, like, can you put an IV in this patient? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just worry as things are going that there's this existential threat to programs like ours that because a lot of states are moving towards requirements for skills-based jobs or some type of training. And I would argue that what we do isn't training, it's education. And those are two different types of things. How do we figure out ways to still stay relevant in a changing environment based on expectations from state commissions and things like that? And maybe that's more of a problem for public institutions than private institutions. So
I think it's a problem or a worry everywhere. So at Flagler, the programs were kind of split between pre-professional, which is like training you to have a job when you leave, and the more liberal arts education. And there was a battle in resources and in focus, and are we, we're not a trade school, and like, are we training them to actually be able to have a tangible job? And some of that is hard, right? So training someone to be a facility manager would really require like facility management software in the classroom, and those are things that change so rapidly, and there's 15 different ones you could use. So teaching them to be teachable, I think, became like how we tried to work that. But yeah, I think that, are we training them to have this one job when they, like teacher education, right? We're training them to be teachers. And this is not that. And there are so many different sports industry segments that these people can go get jobs in. I had one alumni who was working for like a print shop, basically, but the company that he worked for had a license to print the logos for NCAA apparel onto this existing apparel. So that's sport, right? He's using logos and he understands the guidelines and he's in sport, but that isn't something I trained him to do. Like, that was his summer job for so many years that he knew the owner and he got that job. And so yeah, I don't know what we teach them how to write and communicate well, but even, I worked in sport, and even in the organizations I worked for, they wanted things done their way. So they wanted their presentations to look a certain way. They wanted their branding guidelines to be a certain way. So that wasn't something that I had to have a skill coming into, right? I just understood I could follow directions.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And sorry to take us down that path.
No, you're fine.
It just seems relevant. So
I agree. I think that it's all relevant here, right? How are we training people to get jobs? Because the market is not great right now for sports industry jobs. And I did a different presentation for the class of 2019-2020, and it is not good. The data is not good about, are these people employed in sports industry jobs? And even the really strong graduates who had sports industry jobs ended up losing them last spring. So
as did people who had worked in the industry for years and years.
Yes,
so.
right. Yeah.
Right.
That's through no fault of their own or ours as professors. That's COVID. It happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not something that we can assess as far as long-term, because it'll be, as they say, another 100 years before something like this supposedly happens again.
Let's hope anyway, right?
Yeah, right.
These 100-year floods seem to happen
Right.
in 2 years now, so.
Right. Yeah, it's not easy anywhere. People could say that about the hotel industry or the food business or, IT jobs. No matter where you go, it's tough getting a job. So it's not like we can say, well, sports is kind of on the fringe, and so they're the first to go. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So,
just-
so what are your next steps here, Jillian?
I don't know. So I have a draft of a paper for this, and it now, right, the data is a couple of years old now, and I've had a hard time finding sources to make my literature review and my like theory section really robust, because this isn't something that has really been looked at before. So like trying to bring in other industries, and it has been a challenge. So the data that I have, or the previous studies that I have, are old, and that doesn't speak to journals.
Right.
So
Yeah.
But have you looked at the hospitality industry overall? Because that would be, or entertainment industry overall?
So I did find one that was relevant for the hospitality industry, and I was able to like draw some parallels with business and some with like overall employment trends. Um, but it was hard, and it felt forced. Like it wasn't a clear line between this and that. So I do have a draft of this. I mean, I am really like just personally interested in where people end up and what they do. I saw something on Twitter this week about like, if you find years after graduation that you really value something your professor taught you, tell them, because they don't hear it enough, and it's really valuable. And that really rings true. Like I like to hear what people are doing. I try to connect with everyone on LinkedIn just so I see job changes and see kind of what paths people are taking, just because that is where I'm personally interested. Where do you think I should go with this? What's your suggestion?
Do you have a state AFERD journal?
Yeah.
That covers physical education and that kind of stuff. In my sense, those state level journals might be a little bit more accepting of something that doesn't have such a robust literature review.
That's a
So
good idea.
just so I mean, it might be worth it because you kind of know that it's probably not going to pass muster with any of the
big ones.
big sport management journals or tourism journals or anything like that. So just so you get something out of it, it might be worth targeting a state journal.
That's a good idea. I had not thought about that, because I always think of those as being like more PE based.
Yeah, but many of them still have a sport section. I know the Kentucky version has a sport editor and that kind of thing. So, and I'm sure other states do as well.
Yeah.
So that might
That's a
be
good
worth
idea.
looking into.
Would you consider doing another study along this line, perhaps at several universities, and then you could tie in this as like a pilot study and that led you to a bigger study? Not that I want you to do more work, but
I think I am interested in finding out what is happening to all these people. I think that you need some really strong buy-in from others in order to make this work. So when I got the list of alumni from Alumni Relations, because Alumni Relations categorizes anyone who took a class in that program as alumni, even if they didn't graduate. So we had to like weed out those people, and then the information about where they were just hadn't been updated. So I really had to start over, and because no one else cared in the same way about the same information, it was collecting data from nothing. So I think that, if people at other institutions were invested in it, then yes. But I don't know that I could collect data from people who were at alumni from other schools, right? I wouldn't have that connection. They wouldn't see my name and be like, oh, I remember I took that class with her. I should probably respond.
Yeah,
Hi,
it probably
Heather.
works better with partners from other institutions to kind of do their own thing.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I would think everybody cares about where their alumni are. But, you know, as faculty, we get bogged down in all of the other things that, like, as long as they graduate, they're good, they're gone. And keeping track and following up and all of that is just hard.
What do you think about sending an email out to, you know, a group of people? I mean, NASM has this listserv and people send stuff all the time. And sometimes you know, you always get the call for papers and things like that, but sometimes you'll get the occasional, I'm looking for a rubric for this, or does anybody know of a textbook on this? Perhaps sending out something saying, I'm interested in doing a study on this. Would anybody like to collaborate? Maybe. I mean, we could maybe ask Heather and see if you could do that here. I mean, it's you know, at Cosma, because I think it's a worthwhile study to do. Oh, look at from Cosma to everyone. We could do that. Thank you, Heather. You know what I'm saying? If you to find someone to work with, absolutely. I mean, Heather connected me with a couple of people last spring to do some studies with. So it's, you know, definitely worth putting a call out.
And, you know, that finding other people who are invested in helping and all of that is really valuable. That was how I ended up with my co-collaborators, is just people that I knew that were like, hey, I'm kind of interested in that. And David is a hospitality professor. And so we kind of operate in the same system, and he was curious and provided some really good feedback. And I know Blen we started together at Flagler, and she's economics, but has studied like the economics of employment trends. So she was interested, and that was kind of how we all ended up together.
If you don't mind, I wrote your email down from your presentation. I'd like to connect with you through email, and it'll come from Janet House at USJ. And so maybe we could chat.
Great.
Because we have a really small program, and our program just started. So our first graduates will actually be next year.
Really?
We in
Good start
2021.
collecting data from the beginning.
Yes, right. So start now, and we should have. Well, one student should have graduated this year, but he actually transferred in from another program. So there might be some information there we could look at too. But
how many people do you have in your program?
We have 16. So I'm telling you, it's small. We started this in 2018. So we'll have our first graduates in 2022. But it's not just that. I mean, I could reach out to other schools. So, you know, I'd be interested.
Okay.
In seeing, and perhaps, you know, we could maybe broaden it a bit to find, like you said, more of a robust lit review that you're looking for. I'm thinking human resource journals. I don't know where you'd find stuff in that, you know. I don't know, Heather, you might know if she could find, you know, articles that have been written about graduates working in the job they went to school for.
Well, really, it's anecdotal that I am aware of. And that's possibly because I'm not a faculty person looking into this either. So please take that with a grain of salt. However, it can be a kind of a key source of information or indicator for programs to keep in touch with their alumni. And so what I have done in past years is identify programs that are trying to do it as best they can, because it's hard to keep track of people once they're out of your sphere of influence, and that are doing a pretty good job or have at least some interesting methods requiring students to join LinkedIn and be active or something like that. So we have had actually sort of presentations with some best practices related to staying in touch with alumni. And so that would be then hopefully to help understand what their job placement is. And some programs then use those metrics to understand where their students, what they do once they graduate. And you know, so they're kind of a couple angles. So I may not have all the information that you want sort of ready, but you probably have some people that you could talk to that might be able to point you in the direction. So hopefully that can expand what you want to know. And I think it's complicated and difficult, which is what I hear mostly. But and so in other words, so I think still try it, or it's an important thing to understand about what happens once students graduate. But it doesn't mean it's easy or that you get 100% response and you know exactly everyone's always sending you the information without you having to beg for it or look, do some kind of crazy internet searching to find yourself.
Yeah, so the group of people that I was trying to track down, right, a handful hadn't updated their LinkedIn since they had graduated. So it was like they were still listed as an intern and for 5 years as an intern. And it helped reaching out to a few other people on campus. And then once I was connected with some alumni, asking them, like, have you heard where this person is or that person is? Because coming from a small program, they kind of keep in touch with each other pretty well.
Yeah.
And I was talking to one alum and he was like, I'm actually at one of the other guys' weddings this weekend. So, he could give me half a dozen people who were at the wedding and what they were doing because they were all like partying together. And somebody had married someone in the military, so they were all over the world. And yes,
it's very individualized for you because it is so small.
Yes.
Yeah. Some people use graduate students or some form of paid intern to do that crazy web searching for them. So that is another technique is Google, but someone else is doing it.
There was one young man who I was looking for, and I knew he took a class with me. I knew him and I knew his name and I knew where his first job was. And I searched for so long for this one guy, and he must have a common name because I'm now connected on LinkedIn with somebody with the same name who, like, I have no idea who this guy is because I was just like searching. I was like, I know this guy was working in sport and I was so desperate for one more in sport. And I never found him. I have no idea where he went.
Do you require any kind of exit survey for your students before they
So
leave?
Career Services does.
Okay.
And they require one at graduation,
Mhm.
but most of them don't have a job like the day of graduation.
Yeah.
And then they have one 6 months out, but they don't get a great response rate 6 months out. And as I was explaining earlier, the criteria for Career Services is, are you gainfully employed or are you not? And they don't care what the industry is.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you have a full-time job, a part-time job? Are you a student? So once they have a full-time job, it asks where, but not everybody fills that question in because it's a write-in and people.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask if you could try to get them to at least have that write-in, but it sounds like they have it, but it may not be useful.
Yeah, I think the response rates are just not high enough to get enough people.
Yeah. The strongest programs, or the programs that have the strongest alumni networks, really have worked incredibly hard to do that. Kind of keeping everybody looped in, from the moment they leave to, as long as possible down the road. So
who's really good at it?
I think Kutztown University is very good at it. It just comes to mind. Troy University is very good at it. And because I don't say a name doesn't mean anything. Those are a couple that come to mind. Many will use that connection to bring the students back to be guest speakers. So it's good for everyone. The benefits are good for everyone. And some have really robust alumni pages. So the alumni feel good. So it's a lot of work. It is. But I can connect you with at least those two programs. That's what I'm thinking of off the top of my head, which may not encompass all of the programs that are doing a good job at that.
One thing that I noticed with Flagler, different from what I had seen at other schools, was that the students who graduated really loved St. Augustine. And so they gave up sport jobs to work and stay in St. Augustine. So they wanted to be in the, Metro Jacksonville area because they just loved it there and they loved the beach and they loved the town. And they were willing to do something else in order to stay, which was not what I had experienced before that, where people were willing to move over anywhere because they wanted these sport jobs, is that they just loved Florida.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I see Dr. Perry is here, and I'm putting him a little on the spot. So if he's not available, that's okay. But he's at Howard, an HBCU, and I wonder if there are some effective alumni mechanisms that schools like his would also employ. That certainly would be useful for everybody. And he may not be able to answer because he's here, but he's not here. But I don't know. I would think about that. There, like you're saying, St. Augustine is a draw. For some, it's going to be the Greek system. For others, it's going to be some other kind of special component of the university or of the program that really kind of keeps them tapped in. So if you can walk along the beach and see a bunch of your grads or something like that, it's one way to try to keep in touch. I don't think it's a crime that you major in one thing and then you might do some other things in your life. That is normal.
I have a
Right,
degree
I
in
was an
mass
exercise
communication.
science major.
Right.
Me too.
Yeah.
Ask Tom.
Yeah, but I guess, yeah. So in other words, that pressure possibly on you as faculty to then have your graduates work in the industry in which they are trained, it's really out of your hands. So it doesn't mean you did a bad job because they decided to do something else. So for some, then they, like you're saying with some of your students there, they realize this geography is really important to them and they're going to do whatever they can. So I get that. Oh, I guess we're over time.
Good conversation. Yeah, I grew up right outside of St. Augustine. I would love to live there, so I get it. Yeah.
Maybe there's a job at Flagler.
Yeah. Call Dr. DeMartini and see what she says.
You said you're in Gainesville now?
I am in right outside of Gainesville in Alachua.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
It's country though.
It's country. We're on
What I hear.
Yeah, we're on a little 13-acre farm.
Oh, wow.
It's
Nice.
awesome.
Jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
it's
jealous at all.
great.
I've got to have a Trader Joe's within like a 5-mile radius.
Well, we can drive 30 minutes and be at Trader Joe's.
No.
It's-
I need to be able to like ride my bike there or something.
Do you have animals or plants? What do you have 13 acres for?
We for
Alligators?
fun mostly, but we do have a couple plants. We grow a little garden, and then all of our neighbors have animals, so we kind of don't have any we've adopted a couple. Our neighbors' horses end up in our pasture all the time, and my son thinks that's the greatest thing in the world when he wakes up and they're in our front yard. So
That is
yeah,
cool.
we don't
Does he
have-
think they're wild horses have come to his house?
he probably does.
You don't look young to
Go,
make that
"Oh, horses
distinction.
showed up. Yeah. No, it's great though. And I appreciate the conversation and all of you. I think get y'all's opinion. The kind of smaller groups, like I was saying at the beginning, have kind of been a positive in a way, right? And it's kind of more just a conversation than a structured question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. I thought more
Yeah.
collaboration as y'all were potentially collaborating on something. I think it's good. So hopefully y'all feel the same way.
And Julian, I'm happy to help you if you have something you want me to send to the group of people that I have a list for. I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Enjoy the
Well,
rest
thank
of the
you.
Q&A
Thanks,
today.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.